like to welcome to this part of the program from the U.S., editor of America-Hijack.com, Mr. James Morris. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's look at Ron Paul's comments about the situation and dealing with Israel and possibly attacking Iran. What makes Ron Paul able to speak in the way that he does? Because we know in general with anyone running for president in the United States, if they do not come a straight beeline in support of Tel Aviv policies, basically they're finished. So what makes the situation a little bit different for Ron Paul? And thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me on Press TV again. I should put a disclaimer out there that I'm an ardent Ron Paul supporter. I voted for him as a candidate in the last election, and I'll do so again, even if I have to, as a write-in. I didn't completely agree with everything Ron Paul had said with regard to allowing Israel to attack Iran, but I did agree with most of what he'd said, especially what you just mentioned here in the newscast. He can say what he just did because he's not owned by AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and the neoconservatives. There's been a long-running rift in the Republican Party when the neoconservatives, such as the American Enterprise Institute, which sponsored that debate tonight, and mind you, was hosted by the former AIPAC newsletter editor, Wolf Blitzer, who used to be a correspondent for the hawkish Jerusalem Post. So I should really set the context of that, too, and he's been pushing for war with Iran as well. And so Ron Paul is for former Republicans like myself, I'm a registered independent now, I did that last year, we're sick and tired of the neocon hijacking of the Republican Party and these perpetual wars for Israel. And Ron Paul's voice is actually out there reflecting my voice and millions of other Americans who are just tired of it. And he can get away with saying that because he's got nothing to lose. He knows America is on the brink. If we do another war for Israel with Iran, we'll go broke. And not only that, it could result in a wider war in the region, which could result in the next world war, possibly, if China and Russia get involved. But I also think it was very interesting how Ron Paul touched on the Patriot Act as well. In his opening comments, you had Ed Meese, who was an attorney general, and he was basically endorsing the Patriot Act. And if you look at why we had the Patriot Act come into play and all our civil liberties being eroded as a result after 9/11, we got hit on 9/11 because of support for Israel. And, after that, the Patriot Act was put in. And none of these neocon Republican candidates, including Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich is a favorite of the AEI neocons, American Enterprise Institute neocons. Again, they sponsored this debate. Want to touch on why we have a terrorism problem, and they all claim that Israel is an ally of America. Well, I suggest they do some historical research and look at when Israel murdered 34 American sailors and Marines on the USS Liberty and wounded 174. They all conveniently look past that, and they all also say that they like to listen to the generals and take advice from the generals. Why don't they listen to what General Petraeus had said when he conveyed to Congress last year that U.S. support for Israel is a threat to U.S. troops in theater? He conveyed that to the Congress, and the pro-Israel biased U.S. media barely touched on that. I had email exchanges with General Petraeus to show how much influence another neoconservative, Max Boot, had on him, but yet that was overlooked by the pro-Israel, neocon biased American media. And I think we saw an example of that tonight. We have AEI, the bastion of neoconservatism, with Wolf. You've got Paul Wolfowitz and the neocon, the Jewish neocon Frederick Kagan, who came up with the Iraq Surge. All for Israel, of course. We went into Iraq for Israel with the neocon clean break agenda, and it just shows you how much of a grip the neocons still have on the Republican Party, and why many real conservatives like myself actually left the party and became independents, and were ardent supporters of Ron Paul, as I said.
Well, James Morris, you just talked about the neocons and the effect that they have on the Republican Party, but let's look overall in the American populace now as more and more of these Occupy movements take hold in the United States. Do you think there's becoming a greater awareness by the average American in dealing with Israel and how the American-Israeli policies have actually harmed the United States?
Well, the problem is, as I mentioned last time I was on Press TV, is most Americans don't know. They don't know about the 9/11 connection to support for Israel being the primary motivation. As former CIA bin Laden unit head Michael Scheuer had said on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program. That was said to all of America. He responded to a telephone call that I had. You can go to it by visiting tinyurl.com/9/11 motive media portrayal. And he had said that Israel is a threat to American troops in theater, and the same thing that General Petraeus had said, which the pro-Israel biased American media didn't touch on. And none of these neocon Republican candidates during the debate tonight touch on it. All they want to do, like Mitt Romney, is fall over each other for how much they support Israel so they can get the Jewish vote in America, get Jewish campaign donations, get the support of the neoconservatives or the upper echelon of that pro-Israel lobby, and of course AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, that John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt write about in their excellent book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. But just to touch on this, too, they all were advocating an attack on Iran, which is very concerning, and that's for Israel as well. I mean, they brought up Hezbollah and Hamas and Syria. These are all Israeli problems, not American problems. But because of the effectiveness of that pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC, and the neoconservatives, which is the upper echelon of it, we're talking about wars now, not only with Syria, but Iran, and it's all for Israel.
Okay.
And it's about time it comes to a stop. But like you said, back to your question about Occupy Wall Street, if the American public doesn't find out about it from the pro-Israel biased media, they don't have a chance. And that's the issue we have here in America. It's very, very concerning, and it's very dangerous.
All right. Well, thank you so much, James Morris, editor of the Meerkat-hijacked.com from Los Angeles. We appreciate you being with us.